using artificial stupidity to cut down on scam phone calls. I'm Tonya Hall for ZDNet and Tech Republic, and joining me is Roger Anderson, founder of Jolly Roger Telephone Company. Welcome, Roger.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, I've been following your progress for many years now. Tell us what Jolly Roger does and what motivated you to start the company.
The Jolly Roger Telephone Company is a silly name, and it's really a goofy idea. All it is I provide robots that talk to your telemarketers. So when you get a telemarketer call or a scammer call, in most cases, I can intercept that call. Well, we can. We're a big team now. We can intercept that call, and then we will engage the telemarketer with a bunch of robots that sound human and keep that telemarketer chatting for as long as possible. And that kind of just helps to deflate the telemarketing industry and disrupt it as much as possible.
ZDNet's Larry Dignan wrote last year, the world suffered through 85 billion with a B calls from telemarketers and scammers. Thank goodness you offer solutions to both individuals and business phone users, right?
Yes, that's correct. And it's very unfortunate that I love telecom. I started all this because of my love for telecommunications. And I love the telephone network, and it breaks my heart to see the abuse like that. That's way too many calls, and the network can't survive as those kinds of calls just keep adding. It's driving me crazy and breaks my heart.
It's really gotten out of hand. But I want to understand, and I know how this works. I've heard the audio. Talk about it. How does Jolly Roger work?
So early on, I realized that telemarketers, they all use predictive dialers. So that's why when you pick up the phone and you have to say hello a couple times before a telemarketer gets on. Telemarketers can't launch that many phone calls on the network, with their finger, right? They can't just lift the handset and type on the keypad, right? So they have these machines that will dial hundreds of channels at once. So if they have a call center with 10 agents available, you might have 400 or 500 simultaneous phone calls hitting the USA every minute, just constantly, simultaneously, all these calls. And what they're doing is looking for human beings. Well, the Jolly Roger robots, they sound like human beings. They pick up the phone and they say hello a couple times, and they engage with the initial greeting that says, your credit card debt is blah blah blah, and they'll punch the right digit and get an agent on the line. And then once they get an agent on the line, they'll distract that agent as long as possible. So the robots really are sort of artificial stupidity, and they'll go out there and they'll try to engage with the telemarketer and just distract them for as long as possible. And they're pretty effective. And almost always they're very entertaining and funny. And I think that's kind of why it's sort of taken off and been exciting for people.
Now, you actually make it more expensive for phone scammers to conduct business beyond just tying up their agents. Tell us about that.
So most telemarketing blocking solutions, they involve, blocking the call as it hits the network, or blocking the call before it gets to you, or things like that. The telecommunications industry and the government seem to be focused on a strategy of blocking telemarketers, identifying and blocking, which I think we're finding the telemarketing industry is circumventing those, right? The do not call registry isn't as effective as everyone hoped. Whatever regulations or technology the industry and the government and the regulators can throw at this, the telemarketers are getting around that. The Jolly Roger Telephone Company embraces telemarketing, okay? You don't have to, if every single person in the world picked up the phone and engaged with a telemarketer and chatted with them, but never bought anything, then that would be great, right? That would tie up telemarketers, and you would protect other people who might get scammed and things like that. But none of us have time to do that, of course. So I've automated that with these Jolly Roger robots instead. So Jolly Roger will pick up the phone and chat with these telemarketers. They therefore, they'll never get a dime out of a robot, right? The robot won't give up any kind of financial or personal information. Also, the telemarketer can't call the next person in line. So even if the next person was not a Jolly Roger telephone customer, we're kind of protecting the next people downstream. And third, getting back to those predictive dialers, if that telemarketer is talking to a robot, a Jolly Roger telephone robot, it's potentially saving thousands and thousands of calls from hitting the network, because that predictive dialer has cranked down the number of channels it can dial simultaneously, because their agents are all busy and they don't have an agent to feed, so they'll stop dialing. So even if a telemarketer only talks for 2 or 3 minutes with a robot, we might save thousands and thousands of calls on the network and hopefully cost that telemarketer shop some money.
You've actually created a full team of robots to work on behalf of subscribers. Tell us about how a Jolly Roger robot is actually born.
Oh, that's a great question. So the Jolly Roger robots are essentially friends and family. We have some other people who've volunteered their voice talent. We'll go through a recording session. It's actually a fairly lengthy session. We'll ask for a non-disclosure because we'll record a lot of things that kind of give some indication of what might be happening. There's a lot of Easter eggs in the robots, right, with things that are rarely heard. But we'll go through a recording session. We will. We have a great producer, you might call him, who actually engages with the voice talent and draws out some hilarious things, right, and get some good things. If there's a dog or a kid or a wife or a spouse or anything like that, we'll try to engage as much as possible to make these people sound as human and genuine as possible. These are not professional actors; these are just regular people. So we'll get a long recording session, an hour or two, with someone. We will then go through the process of snipping it up and editing them and stuffing them into the system and making them into a Jolly Roger robot. And that's kind of how it goes. We'll oftentimes go back later when other scams become apparent, like we're aware of a lot of different types of scams, but some are more common than others. So we'll try to get things about Windows support or, credit card refinance and things like that. But we might go back later sometimes and ask people to re-record certain prompts, which is kind of a challenge because I'm not much of I don't have a studio. We don't bring people into a sound studio. And so getting the same ambiance and tone and inflection and volume and pitch, getting all of that to match up sometimes can be challenging. But fortunately, most of the telemarketers are on the other end of a really bad international phone call, so they don't notice the difference in sound quality.
So, as with other forms of cybersecurity, there's a continual battle between kind of the white hats creating security and the black hats finding new ways around it. Which is kind of, you're a white hat of sorts, I guess. How have you seen scammers and telemarketers adopt to Jolly Roger?
That's great, and I'm so thrilled that you mentioned cybersecurity, because I do, as much as as goofy as the Jolly Roger telephone company is, and it's a very goofy idea, but there's sort of an evil genius, valid industry solution here when it comes to sucking down as much time as possible, right? But because and we're constantly trying to add new robots and mix things up, so we're trying very hard to surprise the telemarketers so they engage with these robots, but they also sometimes will identify the robots, right? They'll recognize that there's a robot, or they'll try to do a little bit of back and forth, like, "Hey, are you recording?" Right? And then the robot will say, "Yeah." And then the guy's like, "Well, wait, say 1, 2, 3." They'll try to do sort of a mini Turing test with these robots, which oftentimes they pass, strangely. But the telemarketers I've started to realize that there's a strategy out there at times of a recorded bot that might engage with you. And I was kind of flattered the first time I heard that there's a wrap-up code or a cause code. Like in a lot of call centers, after the call is over, the telemarketer is not able to hang up. The policy is you may not hang up the phone. If you're talking to a customer and a potential lead, keep them on the line as long as possible and keep chatting. Well, the robots won't hang up either, which gives us a great combination of events, right? And so the telemarketers will sometimes recognize that it's a robot and I've overheard on the line that there's a cause code or a wrap-up code relating to that it's a recording, or even somebody said, oh, that's Jolly Roger, and then click, things like that. So it's nice to be recognized that way, because even that is still a compliment, right? Even if they get a robot, because again, we've tied up their person, right? Oftentimes we've tied up their supervisor who had to come over and get permission to hang up the phone. And we've made their auto dialer stumble over your house. And so those are even wins. Even when they recognize immediately that it's Jolly Roger, it's still a win.
And they'll hopefully likely remove your number from their call list. What are some of the regulatory hurdles you've had to address in order to build out your service?
Well, I'm completely under the radar, which is great. There's a lot of there's the telecommunications industry in 143 years has a lot of baggage, right? There's public utilities commissions and the FCC and a lot of regulation and a lot of rules and regulations. And a lot of times these calls are international. And so, what jurisdiction do they follow? And thanks to voice over IP, the phone numbers are in one state, the server is in another state, the company running the whole thing is in another state. And so there's such a mishmash of confusing regulations and laws that it's been actually very fortunate that everybody loves the service and the idea of it, and it just hasn't been. Jolly Roger Telephone hasn't had to deal with a lot of regulatory issues, so it's been great.
Well, that's good news. So then what surprises or enlightenment have you enjoyed in learning how scammers and telemarketers work?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. The telemarketers, I have noticed them getting a little bit more clever at times. There are some when you listen to the recordings of these telemarketers, sometimes you wonder, how in the world is this scam possibly effective, right? You just won $6 million in Publishers Clearinghouse, so I need you to give me your credit card so I can mail you this something, right? And it's a bad accent that you can barely understand, and the quality is horrible. And I think, how is this possibly a successful scam? And it's almost terrifying, right? I talk about, it breaks my heart to watch the abuse of the telecom network, but it also breaks my heart to think that some of these scams are effective on people. And I love trying to do my part to protect the vulnerable, who might be elderly or young or new immigrants or anything that way, just in terms of being vulnerable to these scams. And I love being able to do my part protecting the world from that. But it's difficult to listen to some of these, especially because sometimes they're really slick. The people are slick. The scams sound genuine. Sometimes they're not even illegal, right? They're quasi-legal, right? You get a charity that's a for-profit company that's actually calling on behalf of another charity, and therefore they get to circumvent the do not call regulations, and they will keep 95% of the donations and then hand off the 5% to the nuns who wouldn't have gotten that much money anyway. And so they're, maybe they're happy, but in the meantime, they've taken a lot of money from the world, and it's just, it breaks my heart to watch it happen. And I'm trying to keep up with all of it. The challenge, of course, is that there's a deluge of phone calls, and I, of course, don't have the ability to listen to all of them. So I rely on the reports of my subscribers.
Well, we're fortunate that you're a white hat in this space for sure. Roger Anderson, founder of Jolly Roger Telephone Company. If somebody wants to find out more about the type of robots that you have and how you're helping solve this robocall problem, how can they do that?
They can come and visit jollyrogertelephone.com. There's some sample recordings there. We have a very active Facebook page, and there's a YouTube channel with well over 100 recordings, and really getting a sense. The idea of a robot talking to a telemarketer may or may not sound funny, but when you listen to the recordings, it really gives you a sense of how effective they are. The service itself is only 99 cents per month to tack onto any of your lines, and in most cases, we can automatically protect you from telemarketing.
I love it. Thanks again, Roger. And if you guys want to find more of my interviews, you can do that right here on ZDNet or Tech Republic, or go to my website, tonyahall.net. I've got links to all my social sites. Thanks for watching.